Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of DataChat Live with me, your host, Mike Fong, with the ObservePoint team. And today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Björn Buhay, who is a senior consultant in the accessibility space with Tracken. So, Björn, thank you for joining us. I know it's probably late in your working day. And are you having a heat wave or the start of a heat wave in Europe as well?
Yeah, it's really sunny here. I'm located in Hamburg, and this is really surprising that we have lots of sun. Usually it's like overcast, rain, and some and a little bit sun, but lately the weather was very pleasant and very beautiful.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, we are about to experience 25-degree heat at the end of April here in London, so that is very odd. Cool, Bjorn. So thank you very much. Just before I let you introduce yourself, I'd like to say thank you to our audience for joining today. We are live, so if there is anyone out there, please do just drop a message in the chat and say hello. Introduce yourself. Let me know that the chat is working. Anything. Who's out there? So please do that. In the meantime, Bjorn, yeah, it'd be great for you to introduce yourself. What does an accessibility consultant do?
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Björn. I'm working with Tracken, and I started at Tracken 5 years ago with conversion optimization. This is my main part. But 3 years ago, I stumbled upon the topic of the European Accessibility Act. And since when I was young, I did the civil service, and I had a good experience at that time with working with people with disabilities. I always has
Mm.
dreamed of computer science and maybe help people with their disabilities. Maybe I do some programming stuff for interfaces with disabilities. And then I lost track somehow and I got into the field of conversion optimization. And as I said, 3 years ago, I caught wind of the topic of the European Accessibility Act and thought, that's gonna be big because this is gonna be important for e-commerce. And then I climbed that topic and dived into the web accessibility guidelines, and yeah, grew with the topic and also with the demands in the last 2 years. And yeah, it started 3 years ago, and I already had some experience with some clients last year, lots of clients last year, and I'm happy to share my insights and what I've encountered already with you.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. So you're passionate about it from, you've always been passionate about it, and getting into conversion space for a while, and now it's kind of become a combination. Now it's about online conversions with accessibility as one of the big changes happening. Could you tell us a bit about what is the size of the prize? Like, because obviously, in my mind, the internet is about 30 years old. Basically, the internet is about the same age as us, right? I'm in my late 30s. I don't know how old you are. You look very young as well. But the internet is about, 30 years old, 25 years old. And lots of internet users have grown up, right? There are now people using the internet who are probably 70-ish, maybe. So the eyesight is genuinely decreasing for the average internet user. Not to mention that phones are getting smaller and we're all getting more addicted, right? So what does it mean for a business to meet this, requirement? Apart from obviously the legal aspect, what is the genuine business and, need for this?
It's a kind of paradigm change we now encounter because it's, as you said, it's not only good for people with disabilities, it's helpful for everyone. For example, we have certain situations where contrast might be an issue. For example, like you said, you have good weather, you're going to meet a heat wave,
Yeah.
and you're outside in the sun, and you want to just to check on an Uber. And yeah, if you have like bad contrasts on your web page or on the website, then it's you have a hard time to read those. Or
Oh.
another issue is, for example, lately in WhatsApp, it's possible to read a transcript if somebody is sending you a voice message. And this is very handy if you're commuting and you cannot hear the voice message of someone. You can read at least the transcript. And these are things that have their roots in accessibility, but becomes nowadays handy. And I would say accessibility is going to improve the user experience overall
Yep.
because font sizes and contrast are issues that we encounter nowadays and we will encounter in future when we get elderly and more reliant on the internet
Yep.
or devices, mobile device itself.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, from our latest kind of, research of looking across various sources, the the range of somewhere between 1 and 8% of internet users and therefore potential conversions are, have, visual impairments. So obviously at the top end, it's a very exaggerated 8%. And at the bottom end, we think that, if all the internet were perfected for, people who are, blind or, visually impaired, then you can actually get a 1% lift in conversions or revenue, right? And that's before we talk about the usability. Okay, cool. So Bjorn, let's talk about, we've talked about the size of the prize. Can you tell us a bit about, how have you seen your clients react to the deadlines? So just for everyone on the call, or not the call, on watching today, the European Accessibility Act will be coming in on the 28th of June. And this means that websites have to be compliant and have to have a high level of web accessibility features for those people who are visually impaired. And I'm going to share my screen just very quickly and just make a quick explainer before we dive into your experience, Bjorn. Okay, so just to explain what is going on. So, for those of you who are, maybe more on the business side and less on the technology side, I'd like to introduce to you just the W3C. So the W3C is called the World Wide Web Consortium, WWW Consortium, and they are basically the organization that essentially defines standards on the internet. So they define what HTML is. They define, which functions will work on websites. They make sure that Chrome and Internet Explorer and Firefox can read the code that is sent to them from your servers. And part of their remit is to define standards. And so one of the standards that the W3C has defined is known as the WCAG. So Bjorn, can you just give us a bit of a background on what WCAG means? Why are there different versions? And what is included in the different versions?
Yeah, the web content accessibility guidelines, it's like a compendium or a guidance how to make a web application or website accessible. And you have like three levels or complexities. It's beginning with the level A. This is the so-called the start, and then you
Mm,
have a higher complexity. This is double A, and there's so-called the triple A. This is the highest complexity, but the most helpful for people with really severe disabilities.
oh, I
And
see.
on the legal side, you should have at least A or some of the double A points. And that's where the law is not very strict and clear. It's not saying like you should have like the double A or the single A. It's just saying you should be accessible. But the law also says you could use the European standard norm. So this is the OR. This is the so-called industry standard norm EN 301549. And so
Mm,
this is the European, the industrial standard you could use. So these
okay.
are, so these are the mandatory things. But the funny thing is, the industry norm is only saying, yeah, look into the VCAG or the
Yep.
WCAG. So if you're on the double A side on the WCAG, you're on the safe side. But
Yep.
from the German point of view, from our government, we have caught wind that it's not necessary to have all on double A. They're saying some of those double A's might not be applied, but this is not yet written in stone, and we are waiting for the on information from the governmental side.
I see.
But so
It's
basically, that's the VATAG.
it's odd. We've got a question from Mark in the chat to window. He's asked, what how fast do you feel the authorities will start to enforce this versus how fast they enforced GDPR?
It's hard to say. I think they won't do it just from the start from July. I don't think they will enforce from the beginning of July because the
Mm,
law also says if the page persists already before the deadline, then you're
mm,
not mandatory. If you have like a new page or maybe also a CMS update, then you might be obligated to be accessible. So that's what the law says, and it's also not on the interest side to force. They want to make those pages accessible in the future in a good way. So they don't want to force right away.
yeah.
So we believe with the beginning of next year, they try to write those companies and say, hey, we looked into your page and these things are not working on your page. And
Okay.
they also would give you some leeway, so you have some time to correct those claims. And if you're not comply with those what they write, then they might fine you. But we believe that with the beginning of next year, they will start to somehow enforce it in a soft way.
Okay, cool. And is it true that there's a 2 year, so for the next 2 years, existing websites and digital properties do not need to meet the requirements, but new apps and new websites do need to meet the requirements for two
Yeah,
years?
that's where the law is not really clear because in CMS update might be considered as a new page.
Yeah.
So that's why in Germany, because we are very good with laws, in Germany they are already saying here if we update our system, then we are obligated because it's an update of the
Mm.
system, and that's where the law is not very clear.
Yeah.
It's said because it's a new page maybe or
Yeah.
maybe
But what if
redesign.
you're like,
So
if there's a new news story and you create a new page on your website, right? Is that an update or is that not an
yes,
update?
if you have like new content that is coming with beginning of July, this must be accessible.
Yep.
And if you have like old existing pages, these don't need to be accessible according
Okay.
to law.
So that is difficult, right? That's a gray area of what is new content versus
Yes.
what is the same page template, but it's a new news story, for example.
Yeah, and that's where the gray area is, as you said, and that's not very clear by the law. And it's something where the supervising authority might change their mind in future and be more clear what they see as an update and what not. But
Yep.
at current point, it's unknown whether a
Mhm.
CMS update is considered to be a new page or not.
Okay, okay. And how have your clients reacted to, what to the deadline coming up in a couple of months' time?
Oh, there were different reactions. Last year, lots of our customers were saying, this is gonna be easy. There's gonna be a step-by-step guide,
Right.
and we have already a development team, design teams. They will handle that one.
Okay.
And with the end of last year, we caught wind that lots of our customers having this topic on their agenda because they're slow realizing that it's not a topic where you just flip a switch and it's working. And so it changed. So from the beginning of last year, so the spring, that it become from a lower priority to a higher priority. And also we
Hmm.
see that they have now dedicated project managers to for this topic because this topic is
Okay.
very complex at some point, depends on your web page, and they're
Yeah.
now dedicating project managers to make their page accessible.
Okay. And I guess in my experience, I've always been on the analytics side of things, the marketing side of things. So I'm aware of, there are dedicated, in many organizations, there are dedicated job roles for analysts, for marketeers, for UX designers. Where does this sit? Because accessibility is obviously very important for UX design, but it also has SEO implications. It's also really a whole organization-wide, change. So where are you seeing your clients putting, which pigeonhole is this work going into?
Accessibility concerns every team member. That's not a
Yeah.
sole topic for design development or content
Mm.
manager or product owner. So basically, what you need is a technical project manager who is
Yep.
firm with design and technical things and also marketing topics, like you said, SEO. And so this is kind of new role that's gonna be invented. This is so-called maybe an accessibility manager
Yep.
at some point, and we are now finding this job role now, or inventing this job role. So
Yep.
it's not a classical
Interesting.
role, so it's a new one, you could say.
Yep. I was thinking for a while that maybe nobody should specialize and we should all just be slightly good at everything. Because everyone needs to know a bit about privacy. Everyone should know about accessibility. Everyone should know about analytics. And then there's because there are so many situations or regulation changes or data privacy changes where they say it's not one person's job. It's got to be an organizational cultural shift, right? Data privacy has to be a cultural shift. Accessibility has to be a cultural shift. So it gets to the point where just everyone's got to do like 5 cultural shifts so that we're all aware of everything and then nothing can go wrong.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so and which elements of the change are causing the most stress for your clients?
I think the issue that it's now mandatory in July is not the biggest stressor.
Mm,
The biggest stressor is the complexity, because we introduced already the WCAG, and the complexity is in how you interpret those things that are written in those guidelines.
yep,
For example, color issues. The WCAG says you shouldn't use color for the sole purpose to convey informations. This is something where you are thinking, and this is not very straightforward. But for examples, you have like an error text in your form. And
right,
usually, how an error text is conveyed to somebody who's doing an error is just red color. So it's just
yep,
saying, "Hey, you need to type in these characters in red." But when somebody has like disabilities in seeing color, he's just seeing text and he's not seeing that it is red. And
yep,
so you have now to leanway in interpretation. Is this color for informational purpose or not? And is there another way how I convey this importance of an error? So what's recommended by the guidelines is that you give it an underline or you put an exclamation mark somewhere up front to iconification, so that you see, hey, here's an error, not only by color but also in another way. But to
oh,
apply those norms or guidances from the WCAG is not that easy, because you have to find those on your web page and understand the WCAG. And that's where the complexity lies in. And there are numerous ways to make it right. As I said, you could use an underline, or you could make an iconification, or you can make a pop-up to give information that an error has been done. So there are numerous ways, and that's where the complexity lies in. And I think this is the biggest stressor for our customers, that they don't know how to apply the WCAG and how to solve those issues according to the WCAG.
yep,
And as I said, this is kind of a paradigm shift, because now they realize how there's lots of people involved in this whole topic. It's not only development and design, because
yep,
when it comes to alternative texts for images, now you need somebody who you have already who's taking the pictures, usually as the photographer, but he now has to do also the alt text for the pictures, and you have
okay.
to save it some way in a database that you can access this in the CMS. So this is where the complexity starts.
So, for example, if I was a fashion brand and I was about to launch my summer autumn catalog, I think, no, spring summer catalog, or maybe my autumn winter catalog, every photograph of every item of clothing would now need alt text, right? So for all my
Yes.
future releases.
It needs to have at least alt text, or if you have like a caption down under the picture explaining what this article is about, you can refer via the area code that you send, or the accessible rich information code,
Yeah.
that this text under the picture is related to that picture.
Yeah.
So,
And it also, I'm guessing, my imagination is going crazy because I like to try to break things. So what happens if someone has some, vaguely not a perfectly accurate alt text underneath a picture? Maybe like, a photographer is a guy and he calls something like a red mini dress, right? And then the blind, the customer who are, visually impaired buys a red mini dress, and it turns out that it's actually a red normal dress. Is that false advertising?
probably depends on the law,
Hmm.
but the idea of the EA of the European Accessibility Act is to make this better.
Yeah.
So to make the proper and right information as an alt text in that picture. How it's gonna be judged by judgment or by judge itself, I don't know. But at least the supervising authority would say, yeah, that's not accessible.
Yeah. Fair enough. Cool. And so I mentioned, for example, I just made up a fashion industry example. Are there any other industries you've seen that would be more affected or less affected, in what you've seen?
I think it depends. It depends. There are industries or brands that have lots of a high variety of products. I think they have
Mm.
they have difficulties in when it comes to accessibilities because they might have different version, for example, for a product detail page, or the product list pages are different. So they have to take this one into account because how do we convey information on this product detail page and how we convey information on that product detail page. So there is already a level of complexity in it, and so those brands and industries are having a hard time. And electronic companies or companies that have like electronic components, for example, it's also very, very hard for them because they have like lots of tables with specifications and saying, yeah, has this specification, this and that, and these tables need also to be accessible, or they maybe have some illustrations showing some information how this electronic component is working, and also these ones need to be accessible in some way, or they
Oh,
have
okay.
to give some those informations in an alternative way. So
Yeah.
basically, you could say the higher the information hierarchy you have on your page, the more complex it will become.
Yeah.
So that's so basic rule of thumb you could use.
Yeah.
Another industries I would like to mention is like where you convey information with lots of pictures and videos. Car manufacturers are
Yeah.
having like videos and really like big pictures. Those are also having a hard time to make those ones accessible. So they have to do it in an alternative way. And
Yeah.
these are the industries I'm thinking of who might be affected most by the EAA.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I can go on a car brand website, and there's like a car configurator where I can choose four doors or two
Yes,
doors, or I can choose a color. I can choose whether I want a spoiler, alloy wheels. So you're saying that interactive design style journeys would be particularly difficult for to meet the EAA standards.
yes, because based on this configurator, you might buy a car, and the idea of the EAA is to protect those ones who are doing a contract or buying
Yep.
stuff. So
Yep.
this is very hard to do accessible, and those
Yep.
ones will have a hard time to make those accessible.
Understood. I have just realized the kind of silly situation of us talking about obviously visually impaired customers buying a car. In many countries, they're not allowed to drive, right? Because they would be, it would be too dangerous for them to drive. So I just realized how silly we're being. But yeah, that really brings it home. Okay, what about conversely? So in my imagination, publishing websites like news articles or news websites or things like that. So their content's pretty much all just text and photo. They haven't got a lot of interactive elements often. So do you think that they would be less affected by the EAA?
Yeah, news pages they have like a feature picture but usually you have the text, and the text is already telling the story. So the WCAG allows that you could skip it because the text
Oh,
under it explains everything, and
yeah,
maybe this picture is just for decorational element.
yeah.
So that's why I think those ones who are having like a blog or like blog style information and news,
Mm,
those ones are not having a hard time because they have already the text in it, and
yeah, the caption.
so you the caption text, so you could read it,
Yep.
or also use Braille or assistive technologies to get those informations.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I mean the marketing industry has had a hard few years with GDPR really, wiping out a lot of their revenue. So the fact that you get away relatively easy for this one must be a sigh of relief for those organizations. Cool. So, okay, let's move on then. So, Bjorn, what is one myth that you'd like to, or misconception that you think people need to put away?
One would be that you could use like an overlay tool. There are nowadays lots of widgets you could use where you go on the page and you have an accessibility button, and
Yeah.
you can push it, and then you have variety of options to look at the page in an accessible way.
I'm just going to
And this is
share my screen, Bjorn, and show an example for our audience. So, could you talk them through, like, so on the bottom left, can you talk the audience through what's happening here?
Yeah, on the bottom left, you see the accessibility button, and when you push it, you have options to help you that you can see the page with more contrast, or like for example here that if you have like visual impairment, that you have certain options, or if you rely on keyboard navigation, you can flip the switch on. So these tools help to um, make the web page accessible.
Okay.
That's the main idea behind this one.
Yep.
So
But and
also
what is
they
the
have,
problem? What do you
yeah,
feel like? Will these do the job?
unfortunately, it's a fallacy.
Okay.
Already the German supervising authority made a statement that those overlay widgets or accessibility overlays won't help in compliancy, because
Mm,
the problem is the web page itself. Because if the web page isn't accessible, then those tools aren't really helpful, because as you demonstrated, you have to push this button. So if you come to this page with an assistive technology like a screen reader or braille reader, um, you have to navigate to this button to make it accessible. And that's not the idea of accessibility. And also these tools rely on automatic detection. So if your underlying page isn't accessible at all, it might not be helpful at that point. And
mm,
usually if a person has the need of help, because he has disabilities, he usually has already like a screen reader or a braille reader, or is already has settings for their fonts, and this might collide with those options that you have with this tool. So it's not helpful. It's not considered helpful, and that's what the German supervising authority already stated in a statement, that these might not be helpful. And as far as we understand, they won't allow this one, that you only have a plugin saying, yeah, it's accessible. So there are more issues in the WCAG that you will see that it's not very helpful. Um, so that's why it's a misconception or a myth that an overlay tool will help.
okay. So I think,
But
because
there's
naively, I thought that you could just, spend some money, subscribe to this technology, copy and paste some JavaScript onto your website, and then you're done. You've met the EAA. But
Yes,
no, that's not the
but
case.
there's a use case where it's really helpful if your page is like already like really accessible, and you made it 100% accessible. Those tools will be helpful at
Yeah.
some point with new features like language, where you have like the easy language for people who have like cognitive disabilities. This is not mandatory to the WCAG, but it might be an add-on to make your news text is more readable for people who have like cognitive disabilities.
Okay.
And using it as an add-on, feature, this is where the supervising government says, yeah, that's a use case where we see a benefit, but from just using this as a Soleil tool, that's not considered to be accessible.
Sure. Okay. So what would you say, let's say to our audience, on the call today, let's say they haven't started yet. They are a website owner or they're responsible for the digital experience of a website. What would you say to them how should they start today, for example?
Start small. That's what I also tell my customers. Start small. Don't think of the whole page. Just start with your homepage or just one or your main important landing page. Just start there and take the WCAG and start learning by doing. Start from the first 1.1.1. Start from there and ask your page, is my page or the specimen I'm looking at, is it compliant with the WCAG 1.1.1? Start there and write down why it's not. And the
Okay.
next step would be to discuss it with your team, because accessibility is not a solo project. Usually it's a team effort, and discuss it with your team, what you have seen, and if they agree with what you have seen, why it's not working, and come up
Yep.
with your team together. Hey, what could be the measurement? How could we fix this issue? It's also a
Yep.
team effort again. Discuss why, from the SEO point of view, this might be important, and how should we solve it as the corporate identity or the design team. Is this good according to a corporate identity? As the development, hey, can this work how we are thinking about this one? So it's a team effort, and as I said, start small, begin to identify those issues, and then come together to a solution. And
Okay.
that's how I would advise, or that's how I advise my customers to get it started. Because after the first one, the second one becomes easier. It becomes nature that you look at the WCAG, and then you look at the page. I know that one because I already had this in our first example. I know this one, how to apply on this topic, and becomes easier. And when it becomes easier, you will see that you will create workflows, because at some point you will want to become accessible also with your future pages, and you don't want to harm your next update. So you will establish workflows where it becomes second nature that accessibility is on your page. And that's why I said just start small, and most
Okay.
important is get started, and don't be overwhelmed with those gazillions of norms and guidances. Just get
Yep.
started and get it rolling.
Okay. And so you've suggested that, it's not just one person, it's not just one team, it's really an organizational wide mind shift. It's something that's going to have to become an ongoing process for future page releases and future development releases. And I'm sure your experience, my experience definitely, these kind of big changes, um, they're very hard to justify. The stakeholders struggle to see the benefit. So are there any quick wins that you can recommend, like any quick actions with quick wins where we can see, an improvement in SEO or an improvement in revenue that can kind of help organizational leaders see the benefits so that they want to continue along the path?
Yeah, it depends always on the page, but what
Mm,
I always recommend my customers or our customers is just look at the module that's common across the whole page, and usually that's
yep,
navigation. And also, this is in terms of a user experience very important. If the user can navigate through your page, it will find your products. So that's
yep,
why I always say to our clients, hey, let's start with your navigation and see if it's accessible. For example, lots of clients use like the hover effect. And according to the WCAG, it's not a good habit that if you hover over a certain menu item, that it disappears when you leave the hover zone. The WCAG says leave it open because there are people with disabilities who might need to go on a different screen to resize it or to have different needs. So it shouldn't all auto close at some point. And that's why we say if you have like an hover navigation, just it should pop up and stay open until the user explicit clicks somewhere else or
Yep.
presses the X button or presses the escape keyboard key. And also from a cognitive point of view, rethink maybe the structure of the navigation. If it's too complicated, then it's also hard for a user with cognitive disabilities to find the right product. It must not be someone with cognitive disabilities. It might also be someone who is tired. For example, if you have a 14-hour flight and then you have to check into a hotel via an online form, and if there's a complicated navigation and you're totally tired, it's hard to do all those steps. And that's why I said here, think about the navigation, do it more easy for someone who's has maybe cognitive disabilities. It makes a better UX overall.
I mean, when I fly after a 14-hour flight to America, I feel like I have a cognitive disability. I just kind of want to sleep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So we've got a question from Maureen. So I'm going to just bring this up on page. Can you see the question there, Bjorn? Maybe not. So the question is, thank you for the great session. Thank you, Maureen, for joining us. Are there any privacy, so Bjorn, are there any privacy concerns that need to be considered as well? For example, can accessibility break anything that was set up to address privacy regulations? So for example, maybe a banner needs to load before your accessibility setup, or maybe your accessibility setup needs to be in place before your banner. I think that's kind of what Maureen is asking. So have you seen in your experience contradictory interactions between privacy technologies and
No,
accessibility setups?
no, there's no problem. Usually it's the other way around, that those privacy banners you have, they are not accessible right away because you go on the screen and, for example, you navigate with the keyboard and then you hit the tab key and you cannot navigate on this cookie banner. So it's the other way around, that those cookie banners are not yet compliant to accessibility, and you can already let read the screen reader what's in the background, but the banner is always on top, and you cannot navigate on this one because it's at the bottom, at the footer, or at the bottom of the HTML page. So there is no issue when it comes to accessible and privacy, but usually these privacy banners have an issue with accessibility. So it's the other way around.
Okay, cool. Okay, Bjorn, so it wouldn't be one last question then. So for everyone on the audience who is here, thank you for listening. I think what I always want to know is what is the tangible benefits of these. So imagine how would you in an analytics, so maybe Google Analytics or an Adobe Analytics, how would you try to identify a segment of users on your website who were actually visually impaired or blind so that you could track an increase in conversions or so you could track an increase in traffic?
So it's not possible to track those ones who are in need of accessibility assist. That's not possible. So you have to do it somehow, like with an A/B test to see if there's a correlation. If you do something better, if you have also an uplift in your metrics. But when it comes to data tracking, it's not possible to.
Right.
Because, for example, if you have like resize your browser and make the fonts bigger, it's something the browser will not pass along to the tracking. So
Okay.
we don't know how many users really use accessibility technology.
Okay. So we can't track how many people press tab over and over again.
Maybe the tab key, but you cannot say if he has disabilities or not. So this is very
Yeah.
it's unclear by tracking.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Great. Well, Bjorn, thank you very much. I know we're at the top of our hour. We've had, great interaction with our audience. So I guess just the last thing I want to do is say thank you very much. So Bjorn, if people want to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, you can write me an email to bjorn@tracken.com. Or
Hmm.
also, I'm very happy to answer any message via LinkedIn. So just type in my name, Björn Buhay, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Cool. Bjorn, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. So thank you very much to our audience as well for joining on this fine afternoon. We hope to see you on the next episode very soon. Bye bye for now.